If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like, as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. And now, the Sunday address. Jordan Williams has been victimized multiple times. First by the criminal who attacked his girlfriend and then himself on that train, and a second time by the racists on the white right who are telling lies about the assault against him in a fraudulent attempt to give cover to a real killer, a criminal, Daniel Penny. It's bad enough to be the victim of an assault, but it's just as bad to have one's terrible experience exploited by racists in an effort to excuse a real killing. To have some racist propagandist twist and lie an unprovoked attack on one black man in order to justify the heinous, unprovoked, deliberate killing of another black man. But that's what's going on. The white right, who never cares about so-called black-on-black crime, is suddenly obsessed with the case of Jordan Williams. Well, actually, they're not obsessed with the case at all. They're just obsessed with making false comparisons between the incident involving him and the callous, deliberate strangulation of Jordan Neely at the hands of the violent criminal Daniel Penny. History rarely sets up controlled experiments, but because of how white privilege and immunity from law thoroughly permeates every level of the society, you see constant examples all the time of the exact same situation that has the complete opposite results depending on the race of the people involved. The white media will react to the exact same circumstances completely differently depending on the race of the people involved. The police will react to the exact same circumstances completely differently depending on the race of the people involved. The prosecutors will react to the exact same circumstance completely differently depending on the race of the people involved. The differences between the callous killing Daniel Penny committed and the tragic circumstance that Jordan Williams is being accused of are so completely variant, only a moron would try to draw any sort of comparison. Which explains the white supremacists desperately trying and failing to point to Jordan Williams and say that his case proves Daniel Penny isn't a racist or isn't guilty. Keep in mind, this is the exact same thing that they say about the police, that if there's a black person who harms another black person, then when some white supremacist does it, they shouldn't be punished. And that's the way the argument goes. It's not about black people and what they should have, it's about some white supremacists. Never mind that every so-called black-on-black crime results in a prison sentence for the black person responsible, while when the perpetrator is not black, the chances of a trial, much less a conviction, drop dramatically. These are not objective comparisons. These are arguments for racial immunity for hate crimes. When you look at the case of Jordan Williams and compare it to Daniel Penny, the differences are so ridiculously obvious, it's a joke to compare them. Daniel Penny wasn't touched by Jordan Neely. In fact, Jordan Neely hadn't touched anyone on the train. All he's been accused of is that he was ranting. But that was all he was doing. Jordan Neely didn't harm anyone. If anything, all he was guilty of was a public nuisance. There was no physical threat to anybody. On the other hand, the man that Jordan Williams is being accused of killing was ranting and threatening people on the train, to which Jordan Williams did nothing, which was what Daniel Penny should have done. But then the man on Jordan Williams' train punched Mr. Williams' girlfriend in the face and ripped out her earring. Mr. Williams tried to stop him, and he was attacked himself. That was when he allegedly stabbed the man. There is no law or legal statute or legal concept giving anyone the right to kill someone or even to physically touch them simply because they are ranting or even threatening. So when these white supremacist trash claim that the criminal Daniel Penny had a right to kill Jordan Neely, like everything else they say, it's a lie. And now we've had these racists trying to do the pivot and saying that, well, Daniel Penny, he was protecting other people on the train. Protecting people who had not been attacked? People who had not been touched? Nothing was even thrown at anybody. Who was he protecting? Neither the killer Penny nor anyone else on that train had been harmed. And these racist maggots know this. That's what they do. They lie and lie big. Because that's how they try to get themselves out of trouble. Just tell a lie so big that people think, man, nobody would tell a lie that big if they knew it was false, right? People's brains, their common sense, their analytical abilities tend to short circuit or otherwise be overloaded whenever somebody tells a big lie. That's why since time immemorial, every racist, demagogue, and would-be autocrat uses the big lie. They know the laws are, by and large, not applied to these white supremacists who attack a black person and then claim self-defense. And they know that what they're doing is arguing for racial privilege. And being liars and cowards, the white supremacists don't dare admit that, because the only way a liar and coward can get their way is to lie and then cower afterwards. Daniel Penny strangled Jordan Neely for 15 minutes. He did it while the passengers on the train were pleading with him to stop, but he ignored them and continued to strangle Mr. Neely until he was dead. Some of the people who pleaded with him to stop were in fact among the accomplices who helped him to kill Mr. Neely. Mr. Williams, on the other hand, is accused of having stabbed the man who attacked his girlfriend and himself once during a brief scuffle, not a 15-minute-long brawl. Daniel Penny intentionally strangled Jordan Neely to death. He was being told that he was killing his victim, but he kept strangling him anyway. That's what establishes intent. Mr. Williams, on the other hand, was merely trying to get the man who attacked his girlfriend and himself to stop. There's no comparison between the two. Another point of difference between the violent and deliberate killing that the criminal Daniel Penny committed and the legitimate act of self-defense by Jordan Williams is how both these men were treated by the white media, not just in New York, but nationwide. The white media knew Daniel Penny's identity from the very beginning, and yet there was an across-the-board embargo by the white media that they would not reveal his identity. This was done in the hopes that without having a name, the public wouldn't be able to pressure any charges. After all, you can't demand that charges be brought against someone when you don't even know who it is. This is what the white media did. This lets you know that there is an active, organized effort on their part to shield these race killers from even being charged. This is something that is unprecedented. But you should expect to see this a lot more often in the future. This is how you know that you're up against an organized offense. It took citizens going online to finally find out the killer's identity, which was several days after he intentionally took Jordan Neely's life. And nobody in the white media has been made to answer for why they carried out this racial censorship campaign on his behalf, though it does show that the white media is monolithic, that they coordinate with each other on a very close level, because you couldn't possibly have carried out the total and complete media blackout for Daniel Penny's identity without everyone being on board to keep it hush-hush. This was an organized and hyper-aggressive campaign by the white media to shield this criminal from the law by not naming him. And then they hoped the public would lose focus on the killer because the public wouldn't have anyone to demand the arrest or prosecution of. This is the white media putting aside all pretense that they are not protecting race killers like Daniel Penny, and next you'll be seeing them doing this with the police. Now compare the velvet glove treatment that the criminal Daniel Penny got with how Jordan Williams has been treated by the exact same New York white media only a few weeks after the killing that Daniel Penny carried out. The white media put out Jordan Williams' identity the very instant they got it. Not one of them concealed his identity at all. Not a single one. Every one of them was tripping over themselves to be the first to publish his name. Yet whereas the white media copied and pasted the same talking points about Daniel Penny, repeating nonstop that he had been in the Marines, very few white media outlets have reported that Jordan Williams has no criminal record, which was the reason the judge gave for releasing Mr. Williams without bond. Most white media outlets leave that fact out. See, whenever you have some white supremacist accused of harming a black person, they're released without bond or a very low bail, and we're told, well, that's just the system. That's just the system. They don't have a criminal record. That's just the system. Even though we know and it's documented that the police deliberately and intentionally do not arrest white people who have accused a crime. Prosecutors deliberately and intentionally either don't charge them or give them very low charges, and judges decide, well, we're going to knock these charges down or just throw out the verdict altogether. The injustice system gives preferential treatment to those classified as white. So when people start talking about, well, such and such over here doesn't have a criminal record, actually what happens is they just don't get arrested or charged. You cannot compare that to black people who get arrested for things that they didn't even do. There's no crime, but we're going to go ahead and arrest you anyway. You didn't do anything, but we're going to go ahead and charge you with something and see if we can put you away. The white media is not protecting Mr. Williams at all. No concealment of his identity, and they're not lauding him for anything either. The NYPD, they're not concealing Mr. Williams' identity. No protection for this guy. Nobody in the white media is saying what a great guy Mr. Williams is. Same way that when some white mass shooter goes on a rampage, we hear about whatever business he owned or where he worked at or how he liked to go bowling or whatever. It's always turned into some human interest story. It took massive protests to get the killer Daniel Penny finally arrested, a process that took 2 weeks. People had to march and demonstrate just to get that bastard arrested, and he was released on a pitifully small bond. Now compare that to how the NYPD hunted down Jordan Williams within hours of the incident. and the DA's office was rushing to the courthouse to bring charges, and it didn't take a single protest to make it happen. They didn't need anyone to tell them to go after Jordan Williams. They treated Jordan Williams as if he had killed somebody. Now, of course, you have these white supremacists claiming that Mr. Williams shouldn't be prosecuted either. They say that as an afterthought. Only when we challenge them on the double standard, then all of a sudden, I don't think that Mr. Williams should be prosecuted either. But of course, on the white right, none of them are championing Mr. Williams. Who on the white right is making it a crusade to fundraise for him? Is anyone on Fox News sticking up for him? Anybody on right-wing hate radio? Are any of these racist white governors in the South, like DeSantis or Abbott, decrying the injustice of charging Mr. Williams? All these rich white racists, and not one of them are giving 1 penny for Mr. Williams' legal defense, because they don't care about him. As far as they're concerned, he's just a rhetorical shield, an attempt at a phony, false comparison meant to do nothing more than to take the justified actions of Mr. Williams and try to give cover to the unprovoked, unjustified commission of a crime by Daniel Penny. We'll continue with the moment of truth in just a moment, but first, a word from the official sponsor of Black Empowerment, Power Tools. There's no telling when something's going to come up, so make sure you carry your power tools at all times. You never know when you're going to need to bring the hammer down, or when you'll have some trash that needs to be blown away, or some obstacle that requires cutting down. Don't get caught empty-handed. Keep your hammer close by. Keep that leaf blower at the ready. And always carry your steel. Power Tools. Because no matter what your day job or side hustle may be, there's no excuse for not being ready to put in some work. So at every single point, by every single metric you can think of, both of these incidents have no comparison because there's nothing to compare between them. No comparison in what Jordan Neely did or in what DeVictor Udrogo did. And on a side note, the man Mr. Williams is being accused of killing was a person of color. I guess that's why we see the white media bringing up DeVictor Udrogo's prior criminal record. They're only doing that because whenever a black person is killed, they always try to focus on any priors they would have had. That's significant because in cases where a black person is accused of killing a white person, the white media downplays or just ignores the white person's criminal record altogether. But we see Rupert Murdoch's New York Post trying to draw attention to the phony comparison that they're trying to make by saying in the very headline that DeVictor was an ex-con. They put that in the headline. Oh, how very different the coverage is when the person who's killed is black. Because just last year, there was a case of Vonell Cook, a racist ex-con who had raped children, and when he threatened a Dunkin' Donuts employee and began calling him a nigger the whole nine, the white media didn't run so much as one headline that mentioned that Vonell Cook had been convicted of raping children. There were no headlines that said that. Oh, it was wall to wall all about Corey Pujols. Look at this nigger. He punched this old white man and killed him. This nigger, we need to focus on this nigger. It was all about the victim, Corey Pujols. He was the victim. And this was done to manipulate the reader into focusing on Corey Pujols and not the racist child predator who attacked Mr. Pujols and his co-workers. Not a single white media headline, not even one headline said ex-con child rapist bigot killed after attacking Dunkin' Donuts employee, which if they had been honest is exactly what the headlines would have read. That young man, Corey Pujols, acted in legitimate self-defense of himself and his co-workers. But not if we were to let the white right tell it. Because last year, these same white racists who you see claiming that Daniel Penny didn't do anything wrong and he didn't need to wait until after someone attacked him to kill Jordan Neely, they were singing a different tune last year about Corey Pujols. Daniel Penny waited until his victim's back was turned and then he snuck up behind his victim and strangled him from behind like a coward. On the other hand, Corey Pujols and Jordan Williams, they faced their assailants face to face. They didn't sneak up on them. They faced their violent attackers like men, not like cowards, not like Daniel Penny. But all these white right-wingers who were so hot and bothered about how people should be killed for causing a public disturbance on a subway train, none of them said a word in Corey Pujols' defense. In fact, they were attacking Pujols, demanding that he be put in prison, saying this is the problem with America. That nigger, he got away with murder. Vonell Cook was an ex-con convicted of raping children. But nobody in the white media was praising Mr. Pujols. Then again, the white right-wing supremacists are the main demographic responsible for most of the child molestation and child rapes in America, so it only makes sense that they identify with Von L. Cook. Like with like, I always say. You can go back and look into this one for yourself. Most of the white media outlets that actually reported that Von L. Cook was a sex offender, they buried it at the bottom of the story like Fox News did, or for the so-called white leftist media, they would bury it near the bottom of the story. But the thing is, they didn't lead with it, they didn't make a headline out of it, and they didn't give much column space to it either. That's called burying the lead. Or for the white media, business as usual. The white supremacists don't have any principles. All they have is situational ethics and moral relativism. All they cared about was that a young black man punched a racist in the face, and that punch allegedly resulted in the racist's death. That traumatized them, because they certainly don't want that to become habit-forming. But not one of them said that this child rapist who had caused a violent disturbance in a drive-thru and then parked his car, got out of his car, stormed into a restaurant, began making threats at restaurant workers and throwing racial slurs at someone who had done nothing to him. Nobody was saying, well, there's consequences for behavior, or, well, they don't need to wait until he attacks them before they defend themselves. Not one of these white supremacist racists cared that Von L. Cook had raped children. That's not an accusation. That's not a rumor. It's a fact proven in court. Oh, but they didn't care about that. None of them did. They all said that Corey Pujols hadn't been touched and that he shouldn't have done anything. He was totally in the wrong. Oh, but that was last year. And the person who was killed was white, and worse, the person accused of killing him was black, so different rules apply. Or rather, the same old rules apply, the same old double standard applies. Because we see all the time with these white supremacists, the position they take depends entirely on the color of the person they're talking about. They have gone on the record proclaiming that no amount of threats to you or those around you justify any sort of physical response. When the assailant is white is when they say it. But when it's a black person who they say is being loud or threatening, quote unquote, then suddenly killing them is completely justified, but only if it's a white person who does it. And the white media is obsessed with the criminal record of the deceased if they're black, but utterly unconcerned if they're white. And these are the exact same people who today are trying to fool you into thinking they support Jordan Williams, but they only say that when you confront them on the double standard. Because in reality, all they see is a chance to try to muddy the waters and cause confusion. No matter what the white right tries to tell you, Daniel Penny is not the poster child for some sort of persecution. He's the poster child for white privilege. Daniel Penny's in the situation he's in because of his own bad choices, and absolutely nothing else. He's not facing trial because of the decent and conscientious citizens of New York who demanded justice. He's not facing trial because of the lackluster DA who had to be forced to do his job. And he's certainly not facing trial because of the man that he killed, Jordan Neely. He's facing trial because of his own bad choices, deliberate bad choices. He's there because of how he chose to act. He could have done like Mr. Williams and done nothing. Yelling, obnoxious people are part of New York life. They're not pleasant, but since when has ranting, mentally ill people on the New York subway been some sort of heretofore, never before encountered circumstance? Nobody else on that train snuck up behind Mr. Neely because they knew that he hadn't harmed anyone. Daniel Penny was the only person who chose to start a physical altercation. He chose to be the aggressor. He chose to start a fight, and then he chose to strangle his victim over the pleas of the other passengers for him to stop. He chose to escalate a situation which at worst was unpleasant, but far from violent. He chose to kill Jordan Neely. He didn't have to. Mr. Williams and his girlfriend, on the other hand, actually were physically attacked. They did what Daniel Penny should have done. They followed the law, and that's the reason why Jordan Williams was let go with no bail. The problem is that for hundreds of years, this country has conditioned the Daniel Pennies of this world to believe that the laws don't apply to them, or that they shouldn't, which is where all of this phony outrage comes on the few occasions when the law actually does touch a Daniel Penny. You have an unprovoked act of violence by a lying racist punk, Daniel Penny. And on the other hand, you have an actual act of self-defense and defense of a bystander by Jordan Williams. There is no comparison here, but the real lie the white right's hoping to push is that hopefully they can use the totally unrelated case of Mr. Williams to bolster the lie they've been telling for the last couple of months that Daniel Penny isn't a racist. Well, Daniel Penny hasn't been charged with being a racist. Nobody's charging him with being a racist. He's being charged with killing a man without reason. Something that nobody can say about Jordan Williams. To try to compare the two is to intentionally push a lie, which is what the white right's doing, and that's why they're doing it. You cannot name even one instance where a black man's been accused of harming a white one and the white right has come running to the black man's defense. You can't name even one instance. If Jordan Neely had been the decorated Marine, quote unquote, and he had killed the homeless Daniel Penny, does anyone truly believe that Fox News would not be demonizing Jordan Neely? Does anyone believe that anybody in the white media would be calling Jordan Neely a subway Superman or praising him? Who in the white right would be saying we need to be naming laws after this guy? We all need to give him millions of dollars for his defense. Oh, what a tragedy. It's not as if they haven't had opportunities to. But look what they did with Corey Pujols and look what they're doing with Jordan Williams, and you see exactly where they stand. They would be screaming, this is why you can't get on the train and be safe. They would be saying the exact same thing that they said about Corey Pujols, and we know it because it's documented. They had their chance last year to show where they stood on this issue, and that's exactly what they did. They showed exactly where they stand. But they're desperate to manufacture a defense for the indefensible, and they hope that Mr. Williams being black will confuse the issue. But we're not fooled, and we're not going to let them get away with it. When we actually do apples-to-apples comparisons, we see that these two incidents are complete polar opposites. The incidents themselves and how the police, the prosecutors, and the white media have treated them show that there is a blatant, organized, and aggressive system of protection for killing black people and covering for the killers. So make sure you acquaint yourself with the facts. We should support the legal fund of Mr. Williams, and also point out that the racist hypocrites on the right aren't making a cause celeb of him, and that they were attacking Corey Pujols last year under these exact same circumstances. So whether it's Corey Pujols or Jordan Williams, it is a lie to claim what Daniel Penny did is the same, because it's not. We know the difference between legitimate self-defense and a feeble attempt to make an excuse for a cold-blooded killing. And there is no comparison. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Rebellious Zoe, Zachariah Williams, Bobby Williams, Elaine Zanga, and Jerome Purnell. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.